so they only got 2 houses there. Okay, it's 7 o'clock, and I call the July 23rd Planning Board meeting to order. First on the agenda is the June 18th minutes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to table the minutes until the next meeting because there was a discrepancy in the date on the agenda.
Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to table the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. We move on next to approval not required. The first is the applicant, Brian and Sandra McPhee, to subdivide 2.47 acres into 2 lots located at 131 Carriage Shop Road, East Falmouth, BSS Design. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this?
No.
Arlene, do you have any?
We can recommend you endorse the plan approval not required.
Okay.
Okay.
So, hearing no problems from anybody, any questions,
Okay.
I would need a motion.
Move that we approve?
Endorse.
We endorse.
Endorse this plan.
The stated plan of Brian and Sandra McPhee.
Yep.
Okay, do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. The second, the applicant is the estate of Charlotte Hayes to subdivide 7.65 acres into 3 lots in 1 parcel located at 96 Old Main Road, North Falmouth, BSS Design. Does anybody here have questions on that?
This is 7 acres.
7.65 acres.
Okay, looks like old cemetery, we have wetlands.
Mhm.
Okay.
And we've adjusted the lot lines so they all have 100-foot frontage.
Yeah. Boy, okay.
This baby.
Yeah, there's 100-foot there,
Mhm.
okay. What is the office, the staff?
I'm going to ask, nobody has any questions from the board, right, or comments?
No.
Okay, Marlene?
We can recommend your endorsement.
Okay, hearing that, may I have a motion, please?
I move that we approve the
Endorse.
application, endorse the application of the estate of Charlotte Hayes to subdivide 7.65 acres into 3 lots in 1 parcel located at 96 Old Main Road, North Falmouth, BSS Design.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. The third A&R, Mark Comstock, to combine 2 lots into 1 lot located at 137 Shore Street, Falmouth, Massachusetts, BSS Design. Are there any concerns or questions on this?
Frontage. And what's it?
2 streets.
Into 2 lots.
Combine 2 lots into 1 lot.
Okay, your lot's got frontage.
See, there's one.
Currently,
And
that's
there's
the lot line.
Marlene, what street is the frontage
And lot
considered
2.
to be on, Counting House Way or Shore Street?
It's got frontage on both, and there's a house on the lot, it's built over the lot line.
Yeah.
So, there's more than the adequate, there's more than the required frontage on Counting House Way. But it's a combination, so it's moving it, it's still undersized, but it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, okay.
Any further questions from the board? And Marlene? it's
We
okay?
can recommend endorsement.
Okay. Hearing all of that, may I have a motion, please, for endorsement? I can't move it. Come on, somebody.
I move to endorse the Mark Comstock application to combine 2 lots into 1 lot located at 137 Shore Street, Falmouth, BSS Design.
Second, please.
Second.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. And we move on to discussion. We have, the first thing on the agenda is Sharon from the Cape Cod Commission, and we're going to have to have a motion to table it and move on, taking Steve Haddad's out of order.
I'll make a motion. I move that we table the land joint use study, Camp Edwards, Sharon Rooney, Cape Cod Commission discussion for tonight.
Well, maybe
I-
not. She may be delayed.
Okay, so I move then to take it out of order.
Take,
Take Steve Haddad's,
Yes.
to table,
To
and
to table and then take the
Steve
next.
Haddad's out of order. Okay. Do I have a second
Second.
on that? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. You're on.
Actually,
Okay,
Pat, you have notice.
Oh, sorry about that. I always forget. Thank you.
Abutters notices were sent by regular mail on 6/25/13. 18 of those were sent out. 2 were returned, no receptacle.
No one did. No one did their opposed. They had to come down there.
no wonder what.
They're opposed to. They have a
Oh,
comment.
oh. I don't know who they are.
Thank you for the record, my name is Tom Bucker with DSS Design. We prepared these
So
plans for the development of 681 West Falmouth Highway. We had it here, Mr. Alman. I'm somewhat familiar with this. There's an existing house on the property now. Existing house and a barn in the back, which is used for antique sale and small machine shop. The front of the house is 25-foot public use zone district, 100-foot business 3 zone district behind that, and behind that is a residentially, Marina land is residentially zoned, and it's come up in the Board of Appeals hearing that there is a use variance on some or all of the residentially zoned land in the back. What Mr. Haddad is proposing to do is, see schematically here in the color, the existing house will be moved to the north. Some of that will be saved, and the rear part, which is smaller, will be taken off, and new bits of the building will be put on, including a 2-car garage. The driveway, which now comes in along the north side of the property, will be moved up to the middle of the property, and the barn will be taken down. 2 single-family condominium buildings will be put in the back area that has underlying residentially zoned, and a single 2-unit condominium building be placed in the business zone in the front. So 3 units in the business zone and 2 units in the residential zone. The coverages, the overall coverage, there are a lot of numbers in here. The overall coverage in by structures in the business and public use will be 24%, where 35% is allowed. In the residential zone, the coverage by the 2 structures will be 16.8%, where 20% is allowed. And the average overall, if you count the entire lot as one, the coverage by structure will be 20.3%. Guys, when you count the pavement, also the paving in the business and public use zones is 39% is paving and structure, where 65% is allowed. And in the residentially zoned, paving and structures is 26.6%, where 40% is allowed. So we're beneath the allowed coverage for in all the zones. There are 4 parking spaces for 3 of the buildings, buildings 1, 2, and 3. They have 2 garage spaces, plus 2 spaces in the driveway out front. Building 4 has 2 spaces per unit, 1 in the garage, 1 in each garage, and 1 in each driveway up front. That exceeds the parking requirement. There will be lighting at the entrance, pair of lights, and each building will have a post light along the driveway. The driveway is 16 feet wide paved. So there's a request by several people to keep the amount of paving down the width of the driveway, to keep it more residential feel to it. And also, as on a previous site plan, we have the reinforced turf turnaround area. It's not a non-official parking area, but it'll be grass, but it'll be kept open for emergency vehicles in that location. The grading and drainage, basically, the site will, as it does now, the site mainly slopes toward the road, particularly the driveway, and that's what we're going to do now. Here are catch basins just outside of the street layout. The temperature goes on off from all over the road, going to 2 lead buckets, and then at various locations around the buildings, the downspouts will go into other dry wells. The drainage calculations have been submitted to the town engineering department. I haven't seen that before the last. And the septic system is one combined Title V septic system. Each building will have a septic tank that will flow down the gravity to a leaching field in the southeast corner of the property. It hasn't been brought before the health department yet, but it is a type of system that we typically use when we get the larger flows on many developments. Show the other utilities here, individual water services, a main crossing the road or hydrant, and water services off of that road. The one nonconformity is an existing nonconformity. The existing building is 29.9 feet from the street rail line. 1.8A is a 35-foot setback. The building is 29.9 feet. And it's shown on the plan, actually we're getting it half a foot better, being at 30.4 feet. So that's a slight improvement. And the barn is also a non-conforming structure, both in its location and at the height, being an accessory structure. Accessory structure is 31 feet tall. So non-conforming barn being removed will eliminate those non-conformities. There is in their staff report a couple things here. The landscaping plan that has been provided to you. In there, waiting for a referral from drainage. That is the general presentation for the site. Questions?
I'm curious what the reserve area is for. On leaching, it looks like it's on leaching field.
What it's for?
Yeah, is that a future?
It's just a requirement in Title V that will show an equal amount as in case it fails, the first one fails, have room to rebuild a new one.
But there's no piping to it.
No.
How many bedrooms are going to be in each unit?
Each unit is 3 bedrooms, so there's 15 bedrooms total.
Other questions?
Is this a denitrification system?
No, this is straight Title V system.
Other questions? Yep, Jim?
Yes. Is there, I mean, it should be obvious, but I didn't see dry wells. So is all the runoff from the roofs and everything contained within the site?
Yes, there
A driveway.
I have basically infiltrated chambers, they're not the ground driveways,
Okay.
but they're spread around the building. So you have them on
I got him. I see him now.
Are there other questions? Ralph?
Yes, Mr. Bunker, the landscaping plan, are you taking down any large trees?
Yeah, I did not prepare the landscape plan. I think that probably.
Good evening, Steve Haddad, the applicant. I've had several contractors there with large tree spades to give me an assessment of the various trees that are on the property. Most of the trees we actually can move with a tree spade, and the intention is to keep everything that can be moved with the tree spade. Some of the large trees will be removed. There has been, and some of the past hearings concerned about a particular species of tree, a copper beech tree that have the neighbors concerned, and there is not a copper beech tree on the property. The property, unfortunately, is full of Norway maples. The Norway maples is a particular species that's on the state's invasive species list, and you're actually encouraged to take them down. It wasn't my intention to remove all of them, but I had Paul Sellers, who's a senior arborist with N-Star. He lives in the village. Most people know who Paul is and his expertise. He did an assessment on the trees for us, and we've submitted I believe, a letter to the files stating that some of the larger trees are not are in decline of health. So whatever can be saved that makes sense to save, we're going to save, and whatever it doesn't make sense to save, we're going to remove.
You'll be doing this with the advice of an arborist.
Yes, I will.
What was the invasive species?
Norway maple.
Norway maple. Wow. All the way from Norway, huh?
They have a lifespan of about 80 years.
Thank
Other
you.
questions
Thank
from
you.
the board? Okay, well, I do have one. This development is in the coastal pond area, and we generally will do for something like this, we will ask for a denite system. So I'd like to hear what the board would like to do about that, because it's putting quite a bit more burden on West Falmouth Harbor with the number of units here. So I'd like to hear some discussion among the board members about that.
Well, it's still an open item on.
I know, but this is something that we handle as a board.
Right.
So it is in the coastal pond overlay district?
Yes, it is.
And our past decisions?
When we look at something like this, where you have this number of units, my recollection in the past is that we do ask for denitrification, because it is effective when you're dealing with this number of units and you're using one system. It's not, from my understanding, so effective when you're using it for one individual home. And because there is already quite a nutrient problem in West Falmouth Harbor, I would be inclined not to want to add to it any further.
I'd like to know why it wasn't necessary, why Title V was allowed to be put here. If it's our purview to have a denite in this district, in this overlay district.
Because that is our decision, whether we want to have D-night or let it go as a Title V.
Okay. But
We-
the state says you can put a Title V in here.
As far as I know.
I would suggest that you gather all the testimony first from the applicant, from any interested public who wants to speak. If you have, we can go through the staff report when you're ready, before you get into discussing the issues.
Okay.
If that's okay. That way you've heard what everybody has to tell you, and I think you'll get more information.
Okay.
Because I believe that was brought up in the last time, about whether this needed a D-night or should have a D-night.
I'm not recalling
Yeah.
on that. Ralph?
Yeah, in the past, we've actually required denitrification systems in single-family homes that are located in the coastal pond overlay. And if the D-night system is not proposed, I believe then the applicant is required to give us a, and I can't recall whether it's a DRI or what it is, but it's
An impact report.
an
yeah.
impact report, so one or the other has to occur. The other thing I would like to ask Mr. Bunker to do before we take public comment is to explain to us the changes between the last time you came here and now, because we don't have a copy of the old, we have the copy of the existing, and we have a copy of the new. So it's important, I think, for us to understand what changes have been made.
If you don't mind, I'll.
Sure, Mr. Haddad.
And I'm glad you asked that question. When I originally came before the board, you looked at a plan that had 3 duplexes in the existing home, so for a total of 7 units and 21 bedrooms. Through this process, hearing some of the neighbors, hearing some of the various boards, it was decided to reduce the number of units down to 5 and reduce the number of bedrooms. So in terms of, it's very simple. The front house remained pretty much the same configuration that you see here tonight. I had this duplex was going to be built here and here. So since I've last come before you, we've reduced them by 6 bedrooms and taken off 2 units. One of the other big changes that this process has highlighted was that the want and lack of need for the massive driveway that was being recommended. And fortunately, we've now been able to come in and show you a plan that has a 16-foot wide driveway with a chip seal finish to it, so it would look more like a road, small, not look like a road and look like a stone driveway. So those are pretty much the changes that I'm seeing for you tonight. I'd like to speak to a couple of issues that come up that might help. Just digress. Ralph, for you, this is on the Norway maple, you can read that.
Oh, yeah, sure, okay.
I'd like to speak a little bit about the denitrifying septic system. To my south is the Fieldstone Place condominiums. When they were before this board in 2001, Eladio had submitted a letter, the building commissioner submitted a letter to Brian, basically saying that the pond overlay district does not apply to the above referenced site plan. And I think you have this in your file, Madam Chair, for you. I'll give it to you. I know that at some point during the process, Warren Dalton volunteered to put the D9 septic system in. But it was the opinion of the building commissioner at the time that the Coastal Pond Overlay District does not apply. I think that I live in West Falmouth. I live much closer to the harbor than these units are, so I'm very sensitive to the harbor. The reduction in number of units from my first plan, I'm not trying for a massive build-out, the maximum. I'm not trying to put a restaurant there. I'm not trying to put 8,500 square feet of office space with 5 two-bedroom apartments that I could fit there with parking. I've tried to put the minimal amount that makes sense for the project. And so I think that I'm doing my best to be sensitive. I spoke to the Dave Carrigan at length, spoke to him again this morning. I thought this issue might come up. And the plan that I have, Dave's hasn't, he's sorry, there's no problems with the type of system that I'm putting in. I can't speak, I have no idea, I can't predict who potentially will live there, but history tells us that, at least in my Old Dock Road projects, typically, even though it's 3 bedrooms, it's usually older couple, kids visit in the summertime. And it's funny, I spoke to Warren Dalton, and his units, most of them are sold, have been purchased by people who aren't going to live here year-round. So all of mine were people who lived here year-round, and most of his are from people who aren't going to live here year-round. So there won't be families with 5 kids in those bedrooms. That's the best I can tell you.
Any other questions? Bob, you wanted to?
Well, I just wanted to add a bit of explanation about that letter from Eladio Gore. What he was saying is that Coastal Pond Overlay District doesn't apply because it's a residential project like this is not a commercial project. Well, of course, the residence is just like a single-family home is going to be sold. When the bylaw refers to a commercial development, it's not referring to a residential development. And that's what the determination was back in 2001. Now, certainly, certain residential projects are subject to Coastal Pond Overlay District, but only those that are specified in the zoning bylaw. And those are subdivisions of 5 or more acres or 5 or more lots. Well, we don't have 5 or more dwelling units proposed, but in any case, it doesn't meet that criteria. And that's why Coastal Pond Overlay District didn't apply to a Fieldstone place next door, and that's why it doesn't apply to this case. So I don't think that under site plan review, you'd have the authority to condition an approval on the installation of a denitrification septic system. Certainly you can make a suggestion of that in the referral to the Board of Appeals. But the Coastal Pond Overlay District, which has been described absolutely correctly, that you need to do a loading study, a nitrogen loading study, an impact report, if you're subject to it. But the policy of the town has always been to not require that if you are doing denitrification. But this isn't a case where Coastal Pond Overlay District regulations would apply. The other thing I wanted to just tell you, you have in your file, you have a copy of the letter from Paul Sellers, the arborist, about the trees on the site and describing the particular trees of interest. And that was submitted to the planning board today. The letter was only received yesterday. So you do have that.
Okay, any other comments from the board? I'll now open it up to comments from the public, and remember, this is site plan review that you'll be commenting on. Any of the things that we can look at under site plan review. And if you have comments or questions, please go up to the podium and state your name.
abutter. Just for clarification, Fieldstone Place does have a denitrification system. And given the fact that denitrification can cut the nitrogen output to the harbor by half, I think it's a responsible thing to do. Just a couple of fast comments tonight. I just hope that this board understands there's no less residential resistance to this project than before. I totally acknowledge that Mr. Haddad has made concessions in response to other board reaction, etc. But this, for us, is more tied to part of your mission statement about the long-term planning for the town. And I want to reference back to an editorial by Bill Huff, who talked about our history slipping away, and that's what we feel is going on in West Falmouth. We can talk all we want in bylaw language about non-conforming structures, but the bottom line is that a 100-year-old barn is going to be razed. We're losing that, and when we lose our history, we lose it forever. To push on to the public, to the planning board issues, I just wanted to comment that we'd like to see the landscape plan. The public would like to see that because while there may be an intention to save trees, I think we have to apply it to then Paul Sellers' report and understand what is going to be built. Because what we have now with every plan that Mr. Haddad has presented is a plan that has a driveway severing what used to be a unified, integrated, historical property. So we're trying to understand from a streetscape perspective, for example, the impact of this development on the streetscape. People are very concerned, as you can appreciate, that their view is about to be appreciably altered from something people appreciate to a what I call a suburban look. Let me just make sure I'm not missing anything else here. Also, I'm assuming you're going to be looking at traffic mitigation, all of the other issues that are coming up. I'm not sure, I didn't hear anything about traffic. At the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting last time, Mr. Ahmed referred to comings and goings from a residential area as being once a day. I don't think any of us live that kind of life in cars, so I would just ask you to take that into consideration as well. Thank you very much.
Any other, yes, Nancy?
Nancy Hayward, West Falmouth. At the time of your first hearing, I had submitted a letter to the planning board. I do not know if you ever got that letter. Some comment was made to me about the fact that I hadn't properly addressed it. And I did not copy Ms. McCollum or Mr. Curry, and that was certainly an error. Everything I said in that letter, and that letter is somewhere, is still applicable. And I feel that Mr. Haddad mentioned the original house. The original house is not in the original location, and the original house is altered in this movie. And the coastal pond overlay and the nitrogen issue has been mentioned, and there's mention about this wasn't done before and that wasn't done before. The point is that as of 2013, the nitrogen issue is worse than it was at the time of other developments. And because there was no effort to control nitrogen in other locations is not the reason to make an effort with some current development. This lot is very close to the Snug Harbor end of West Falmouth, and I'll let it go with that. And I would like to give this information to you. I hope somebody will look at it, and I am handing it to you, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. Yes.
Okay, sure. West Falmouth, I live in Old Dock Road, from the Steve condominium. I'm very happy with. I think the landscaping he did there was extremely good and a lot better than the other landscaping I've seen in other areas in town. But West Falmouth is changing. Our citizens in West Falmouth who have lived here for their lives are getting older. And they've paid a lot of taxes in big houses. And they want a condominium. They want to stay in the town that they've been living in for 50 years, 60 years. I did it. I was on the water. I had a big house. There are other, 3 people I know that are hoping these get built. These are not close to West Falmouth Harbor, I'm afraid. You've got a lot of ways to go. However, nitrogen in West Falmouth Harbor is improving. It is not going down here at the moment. We've done work with the sewer treatment plant, and if the boards in town do something about this outfall system, which I haven't heard much about, going into Crocker Pond, which nobody seems to care about, that'll do some harm, do a lot of harm. But this project isn't going to. We're not going to keep the red bond. Someone's going to buy that piece of property, and someone's going to do something with it if you can. And I can see 40B in there. I can see a retail development in there.
Dan, I have to interrupt you
Okay,
because this is site plan.
Site plan. Well, this is a site plan. What is going to happen to that site? It's going to be something that's not going to stay the way it is. Nothing in West Falmouth is staying the way it is. And I think you should look at both sides of this. What is going to happen now with this, what could happen with no need for your approval. That's all I want to say. I really hope this goes through. I think it is the thing. I'm on the West Falmouth Village Association, and I think you've got a letter from our president and vice president that they're for this plan now. I'm not speaking for them. We certainly discussed it, and I don't think anybody here from that group. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Is there anyone else who wishes? Yes.
My name is Carmina Muñoz de Luna, and I am 23 Stagecoach Way in West Falmouth. And I have been in this area for 12 years. And there is no place on earth that I love more than West Falmouth. And I come here with a wish that this board and the other board of historical appeals, that you have the clarity mind and heart to make this situation a win-win for everyone, including the birds and the bees. And that consider also the impact that so many buildings in West Falmouth, how is it going the town of Falmouth cope with that. Recently we were told that the firehouse station is going to close. how this is going to impact the waters, and so we have to think clearly about what is going to happen to West Falmouth. And are we so poor that we only think in terms of money? That would be such a pity for all of us. And I also have a question about the parking lot. Could someone explain to me the guest parking lots? There were 5 of them, apparently. But then if emergency vehicles are going to come in that area, how is it going to happen? I couldn't see it.
Either one of you can speak to it, whoever wishes to do so.
The plan before you tonight, in the past plans that I've presented to various boards, and it's very, very difficult to please everybody. But some of the comments that I've heard consistently is with respect to the road width and the amount of guest parking spaces that I have. And the inference was they'd like the road to be smaller and fewer guest parking spaces. I agree with half that equation, which is a smaller roadway, but I certainly don't agree with the guest parking spaces. People have guests. Everybody has guests in the summertime. So I have drawn on the plan what I consider to be the minimum amount of parking spaces that I could tolerate, but certainly not the amount of parking spaces that I would like to have. I would anticipate that for most of the time, this will be fine, and it'll be typical Cape Cod. People end up parking on the grass. And we will have something in the condominium docks to make sure that the roadways will never be planted within 2 feet on either side, so that in effect, if there needs to get emergency vehicle access up there, that someone needs to pull off the side of the, I've had in-depth conversation with the fire department. The proverbial, if an ambulance is coming in the driveway and someone wants to leave, the likelihood is just not all that great, but in that event, there will be 2 feet of shoulders on both sides of the 16-foot driveway for someone to pull off the driveway for the 8-foot wide ambulance to get by.
Thank you. I think she was also mentioning, though, Steve, that she wondered where guest parking was, and what about the, I guess you call it the emergency vehicle turnoff, that will be mowed and will have some kind of foundation to it. Is that anticipated to be used as potential guest parking, or will that have signage that there's no parking there? How do you see that?
In the condominium docks, we will, and let me digress for a moment, as you know, that reinforced turf, I am anticipating a mats of PVC, very dense. I think the board is familiar with it. You see it typically around college dormitories and whatnot for this exact purpose, to stabilize the lawn so that heavy vehicles, emergency vehicles, can effectively here do a K-turn. So no one would be encouraged to park there. Most people will park in the driveways. We're fortunate enough if people are going to be there and there aren't opportunities to park. I'll tell them what I told the people at Old Dock Road. You can park over by the bike path. You can walk over, do what you like. I had plenty of parking previous plan. I have this plan responds to, we don't like all the parking, we don't like the road width. I'm trying to do the best I can and make it actually function.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to comment? Bob.
I just want to comment on a couple of the points that have been made. First, Steve's plan shows 15 parking spaces. As you know, only 2 parking spaces are required per unit, so that's 10 units would meet the parking requirement. Nobody wants there to be too little parking. Nobody wants people to be parking along the street. There needs to be enough parking. Steve thinks that 15 is the minimum that he ought to have. And that amount of parking certainly doesn't diminish the plan, I think, particularly because the lot coverage for total, even if we added any grass parking, but the lot coverage is well within the zoning bylaw requirements. And that, you know, the plan meets zoning bylaw requirements. It is not because there have been other projects that didn't use denitrification that the board shouldn't, as part of site plan review, require denitrification in this case. It is because the Coastal Pond Overlay District doesn't apply. And the 2001 decision is unchanged today. That decision, as stated in the correspondence from the building commissioner to Brian Curry, the decision was made after review with the town council and the zoning board of appeals administrator. In that letter, it was suggested that there is some ambiguity, though they came down on a certain decision. They said it was ambiguous and that they recommended changes to the bylaw. That was in 2001. There have been no changes to the Coastal Pond Overlay District bylaw provision that we're talking about since that time. It's simply a matter of the law that applies to the site plan review is the reason why a denitrification system should not be part of your decision. I've already said, and I'll say it again, you can make that recommendation if you think it's appropriate in a referral to the Board of Appeals, but that's where you have a different type of authority. I'd like to point out that in its last decision, the Falmouth Historical District Commission, though it turned down a previous plan that showed an additional building, didn't show the narrowing of the driveway and some other reasons. The Historic District Commission indicated what it would approve, and we expect the board, the Historic District Commission, to approve this plan because it meets all of the criteria stated in their decision. And one of those criteria was that they thought it was appropriate to relocate the existing house as shown on the plan. It's a slight relocation, about the same height in relationship to the road. The building will be oriented to the road in the same way. And they felt it was appropriate because it would allow for greater separation between the existing historic building and the duplex that is shown on the plan. For that same reason, they felt that the driveway through that area, which goes along with moving the building, was appropriate. The Historic District Commission has said that. It's been said that I said at a previous hearing that each residence would only generate one traffic trip a day. That's not true at all. I never said that. Perhaps the speaker misunderstood when talking about peak hour trips versus daily trips. The Institute of Traffic Engineers publishes data on the basis of which we compare traffic generation of different activities. For a condominium townhouse, the peak hour trip in the afternoon, around 5 o'clock, is reported to be 0.52 trips per unit. So that would be, for 5 units, 2.5 trips. Now each trip in or trip out is a trip. So a round trip is 2 trips. I never would have said there was only 1 trip a day because people wouldn't be coming back home. For detached single-family housing, the peak hour is 1.01 trips, or 1 trip roughly, on the average, per hour. So even at that rate, it's 5 trips in or out. I suppose at late in the day, maybe it's 4 trips in, 1 trip out. But that's for detached single-family housing, and this is probably some mix in between condos, townhouses, and single-family housing because of their design. Now, when we compare the traffic generation of 5 townhouses or condominium residences to almost any commercial use, including the uses that are permitted already on the site in the back of the property, there is no comparison about the trip generation, other than that the residential use would be greatly less than business use. The property, of course, has 20,000 square feet of business zone as part of it. And the same is true with parking. If the barn in the rear of the property met today's parking standards, which didn't apply when those commercial uses were allowed in 1963, because of the size of the facility, just that building would require 29 parking spaces under the current regulations, versus 10 parking spaces required for the entire residential project, for all of this project, not just what's in the back. So in terms of traffic generation and parking, certainly a great reduction, and that really goes to the mitigation. There's already been a reduction from what would be allowed by special permit for a number of multifamily dwelling units that would be allowed on 1.19 acres, which is what this is. That would be 7 units would be allowed. So it's been dropped down to 5. Also, for traffic mitigation, you have in other cases, you should in this case take into account the proximity to the bike path. The fact that in this particular place with garages, people will be able to keep bikes safely, so that's a reduction. This site is a little less than 0.2 of a mile from the Woodsville Market. People can walk to a store. So these are all issues that go to traffic mitigation, and should indicate that, given that we're talking business-owned property, this is extremely little traffic generating activity. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else? Then I'd like to go to Marlene to go over the staff report, which I failed to do in between, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I do want to spend a little bit of time on a number of issues here. There are some differences with this project than with site plans you might have seen in the past with similar projects. The first thing I want to say is your file does have a number of letters and emails with providing additional public comments, so that is part of your record, and it's here for you in the file. We do not, I'm sorry, have a copy of Mr. Sellers' report, so if that's, we have Attorney Ahmed's letter from today, but I don't see Mr. Sellers' report in the file, so if that's something that we could get another copy of, I would appreciate it. I want to start up at, we usually, when we go through these staff reports with you, we kind of skip over this first top section of information, but I want to talk a little bit about the zoning districts. You're dealing with a lot that has a number of zoning districts that is mapped on it, and there is a section of business land and there's a section of residential land. Now when there is also a section of public use that is contained wholly within the front yard setback, so I'm not going to talk about that one necessarily because it's not available for building. But on other site plan review projects that you've seen on split zone lots, you've seen a number on Palmer Avenue and Locust Street. There's a mixture of general residence and light industrial A along the railroad right away there that you've seen a number of projects on. And we're always talking to you about how the use, the active use has to stay in the district where it's permitted. So we're doing something different here, and I just want to take a little bit of time to make sure that I explain it to you about why it looks different. So in a, quote, normal site plan review for multifamily housing, we would require that this site be organized so that all of the active use of the multifamily, which includes the buildings and the parking, would reside in the district where it's allowed. Now, it's allowed by special permit in the business district. So it's not allowed in the single-family residential district. So generally, we would see all the uses up in the business zone. This property is also subject to a use variance, and that's, you've discussed the letter that I've sent to the zoning board in the past, and the zoning board has indicated, they have not formally voted, but they're indicating that they're going to move forward with approving a modification of that use variance to allow these 2 units to be located in the residential zone. So at this point, I'm confident in saying that this is a plan that is viable, and you can continue with your site plan review. And I'm happy to answer questions if you have any, but I did want to take a little bit of time because you would generally not see this organization of parking and structures, but because of the use variance, the rules are a little bit different. So that's what I wanted to tell you about the zoning districts. The nonconformities have been discussed. And we've talked a bit about the Coastal Pond Overlay District, and I'm going to take a little bit more of your time to discuss this. The Coastal Pond Overlay District was created in 1986. And as you're familiar with it, there's generally 2 parts of zoning. There's the language that you write and put in the book, and then there's the map. So you did this not too long ago with some light industrial land. You created a district, light industrial C, you wrote all the language, you put it in the book, and then you went back at a different town meeting and you actually mapped it on the zoning map. So the same thing happened with the Coastal Pond Overlay District. It was created, excuse me, did I say 1986? It was 1988. It was created in 1988. And it was put in the book. At that time, there was also a map associated with it that defined watersheds for the estuaries. The 1988 map did not define a watershed for West Falmouth Harbor. Now, that's important because there's a couple of pieces here that I want to talk to you about. In 240-98, that is talking about when does the Coastal Pond Overlay District come into play? And subparagraph A talks about your subdivisions. That's your 5 acres, 5 or more acres, or 5 or more lots. So that's a separate standalone trigger. Subparagraph B talks about commercial development requiring site plan review. That's a second trigger for a Coastal Pond Overlay District. Subparagraph C is special permit uses filed in accordance with Article 32 of this chapter within 2,000 feet of those water bodies listed in Section 240-100 that do not have defined recharged areas. Now, this letter from the building commissioner that has been referenced is specific to that 3rd section, Section C. It says, after reviewing Section 240-98C of the zoning bylaw with you, and you is Brian Curry, Bonnie O'Neill, who was the zoning board administrator, and Frank Duffy, town council, it was determined that the Coastal Pond Overlay District does not apply to the above referenced site plan Now, the site plan that they're talking about is the lot directly to the south of this site, okay? And we're talking about C, because remember, at that point, West Falmouth Harbor was not on the map. Now, the application for the site directly to the south, Fieldstone, was March 20th, 2001. Mr. Gore wrote his letter June 15th, 2001. Okay, and at that time, West Falmouth Harbor was not on the map as a defined watershed. If you look at the legislative history in subparagraph C that's outlined in your book, you'll see amended annual fall town meeting, November 13th, 2001. Article 3 approved, and that means approved by the Attorney General, March 15th, 2002. Now that amendment in 2001 is speaking to this ambiguity that Aladio's letter talks about. It says, in my letter to you of May 7, 2001, I mentioned in paragraph 6 that this section, 98C, is ambiguous and needs to be clarified. It was clarified a couple months later in November of 2001. And what that article did was it added West Falmouth Harbor to the map. It delineated that. If you look at the map, it's a red and white dashed line, and it delineated that watershed for the Coastal Pond Overlay District. So subparagraph C has the word "not" in it. This only applies to projects that are not shown on the map. West Falmouth Harbor now, in 2013, is on the map. So subparagraph C falls away. I am telling you on the staff report that I think you do have authority to discuss and to require a denitrifying septic system if you so choose under the previous paragraph B. And it says commercial development requiring site plan review. Commercial is undefined in our bylaw. It's not defined in section 13. Commercial accommodations are, but commercial development is not. But it clearly says requiring site plan review. So we all know the quirks of this bylaw can be difficult to use. And I think you need to go also to the site plan review section, and I think you need to read these together. Because when you go to 240-192, which is applicability for site plan review, it says any new development or expansion in use other than one single family or one two-family residence on a lot. So we're using the word development here to pull out all development that's not one family, not one single-family house, and it's not one duplex. So it's I think it's up to you to decide on whether or not you feel that when you read the applicability of site plan review together with the applicability of Coastal Pond Overlay District, I think it's up to you to decide whether or not you want to look at this as a commercial development, a commercial enterprise. I don't think we're talking about subparagraph C. I don't think the 2001 decision applies anymore. The map was changed later in that year. So I think the point that you need to discuss is the word commercial in subparagraph B for Coastal Pond. So that's what I want to talk to you about Coastal Pond Overlay District. All of the rest of the overlays, we don't have any issues with. It's not in the wildlife corridor. We're not dealing with conservation or a steep site. You have your landscape, you have the landscaping plan. You've heard the presentation on the traffic mitigation, so those are both ready for you to discuss. you've heard the discussion on the parking, that it more than meets the requirement in the parking schedule. The access will be determined by the Mass Highway Department. It's a Department of Transportation curb cut. It's not a local curb cut. The circulation, they are providing the turnaround for the emergency vehicles. I did talk with the deputy fire chief today. If it's possible to have the 2-foot shoulder on either side of the driveway, and possibly reinforced with the same PVC mats that will be used in the turnaround. They did request that, but 16 feet is adequate for the ambulance to access the site. And also, so you know, in reviewing the 2001 file for the site to the south, the planning board required that the driveway be limited to no more than 16 feet in that project as well. So it would be a consistent driveway width. We do not have a referral from the Board of Health, and we are waiting on the referral for the drainage from engineering. They have the calculations, they haven't had a chance to finalize their review yet. There's no Cape Cod Commission involvement. The Historic District Commission will review the project again at a future meeting. The Board of Appeals will at some point issue a decision on the use variance modification and on the special permit use for the multifamily in the business zone. And because it's in the Historic District, the Design Review Committee is not involved.
Okay, do any board members have any questions of Marlene?
I do. Marlene, do we have, I guess I want to know if it's either or both, as relating to requiring a D-night system or referring it? You know, what is the normal process here for us to require it? Or we have a referral process that we do and we leave it up to another board, we just give our opinion. What is?
You can send referral on zoning issues to the zoning board.
Right.
You're not issuing a permit here. A site plan review decision is not a permit. It's a letter that is sent to the building commissioner that's attached to the building permit. That's the permit that we're talking about here. Now, I think that you have the authority under B of 240-98 as a site plan condition of approval to Eladio. I think you have the authority to do that.
So it's both. We have either or. We could do either or.
Yes.
Okay,
I
thank
think you are a standalone board. You're making your own decision under site plan review and its requirements, and you can condition your decision how you see fit. And I believe that you can also send further comments, if you have them, to the zoning board.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any comments or questions? Okay, well, as you know, this is site plan review, and so without anything further here, and I thank the public for their comments. Bob?
Close.
Marlene has explained why section 24098C doesn't apply. Although Tom Bunker has pointed out to me that it specifically says that section has to do with Article 32 of the bylaw, which has to do with public or nonprofit housing for the elderly. I don't think it applies to the plan in any case. The question is, what has changed since the 2001 letter of Eladio Gore that would make the Coastal Pond Overlay District apply in this case, when it was determined that it didn't apply to the very similar, in many respects, residential condominium development right next door. And that's because this is not commercial development. We have a section in the business district bylaw, for instance, that talks about what are the permitted business and commercial uses, and it lists the things we think of as commercial, retail sales, business, restaurants, and the like. Nowhere is multifamily use referred to as a commercial activity. It isn't. It's residential. It's not business. Yes, again, just like single-family homes, a developer builds the unit and sells them. That's not what we mean by commercial. That doesn't make a single-family dwelling commercial either. We're simply saying that the bylaw needs to be followed. This isn't commercial. Site plan review applies, but not coastal pond overlay district. And you can make as strong a referral as you feel you should make to the Board of Appeals, but this is a decision for them to make, I believe.
Anybody else? Okay, and then I want to thank all of you, and we'll move on, and I'm not sure. Yes, go ahead, Paul.
It's called Fields, though.
This area to the south, there's several condominiums. What sort of wastewater system is there? Is there a nitrification system there
Yes.
on the south of this?
Yes.
They do have nitrification system.
Denitrification.
The letter that I submitted from Eladio specifically speaks to that project, saying that the coastal pond overlay district did not apply.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with Warren Dalton, who did a fine job of building those. And I said to him, why the denitrification system was a requirement? He said no. This was something he volunteered to do. It was not a requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up on that, usually not a good idea to say something you're not sure, but I don't believe, you didn't put a denitrification system in at the,
No, I did not.
right at the corner where the ideal spot was. That was not required. And how about Warren's new project?
No.
There is no denitrification in the new project, just on the other side of Old Dock Road, down 28, saying that, West Wind, which has, I believe, 12 units approved in a project that's still under construction.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything further? Okay, thank you. So we'll take up, considering the time, I don't know that we're going to have time to discuss this tonight, which we could do. So I think we'll close this out now and then move on, and when would be?
Well, given, your last meeting is August 13th, so if you discuss it tonight, we can schedule it for a decision next week.
Okay.
Otherwise, you'll have to discuss it next week on the 30th with, after CVS, and then decide it on the 13th.
Okay, what's your druthers?
Because you're not meeting the 6th.
Mhm. Discuss tonight, yes, no?
I move we take it under advisement and if necessary, meet an additional time that's not planned.
Do I have a second on that?
I'd second that.
Okay. Any discussion?
I can, let me talk to you about your schedule then. So you've got next week where you're meeting, the 30th. You can't meet, well, let me put it this way. You can meet the 6th. Brian's on vacation and I'm not going to be here. And then you're meeting on the 13th. So you can either talk about it tonight and decide it on the 30th, or you can talk about it on the 30th or the 6th without any staff and decide it on the 13th.
Bob, your comment? Obviously, it's in regard to this.
Of course, and I just want you to be aware, the board to be aware that the Board of Appeals hearing has been continued until August 8. I believe at that time it's likely that they will make a decision. So I think if you want your site plan review and/or referral to be considered by the Board of Appeals, then it'd be appropriate to act sooner rather than later.
So discuss it tonight.
It's up to you guys.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Any discussion on it? Well, I'm going to discuss then. I don't want to stay here late tonight, but I think the time constraints would appear that we probably ought to discuss it tonight. We need to go back to the original agenda so we can have Ms. Rooney do her presentation.
You can do that. You can have the presentation on the JLU study and then go back to the discussion if you so choose.
Nobody else has any discussion on that?
I'm prepared to discuss it tonight if we want to.
Okay, the motion on the floor is that we continue this to another time.
There was no second, was there?
Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
So we need to vote on it.
So we need to vote on that. So all in favor of continuing the discussion to another time, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye.
Aye.
Oops.
So we'll discuss it tonight.
Okay. So you're okay, it's a tie, and we'll discuss it tonight then. Okay. So we need to have a motion then to move back to the original agenda to give Ms. Rooney a chance to do her presentation. May I have that motion?
Okay, I move that we go back to the original agenda item so that we can give Ms. Rooney her chance to make her presentation.
Okay, second,
Second.
please. You have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Well, good evening, and thank you for giving me the courtesy to interrupt your meeting and your discussion. I'll be very brief. As soon as I have a brief PowerPoint presentation. As some of you may be aware, the Cape Cod Commission has been engaged with Massachusetts Military Reservation and surrounding towns on what's called a joint land use study update. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Just to give you a little background, the Joint Land Use Study Program, or JLUS, is a cooperative planning effort that was established many years ago between military installations and the surrounding communities. And the objective of the program is to ensure that community growth is compatible with military training, and likewise that military training is hopefully to reduce the impacts of the training on adjacent land use. So back in 2005, the MMR was nominated, I guess it's now called Joint Base Cape Cod as of yesterday, but my slides still refer to as MMR. It was nominated by the Army for a joint land use study due to the increase in the number of range training days. And as we're all aware, the surrounding population growth in Cape Cod was still booming, and potential land use conflicts between training and base operations in adjacent land and land use development. At that time, the Cape Cod Commission was contracted to prepare the joint land use study with a grant from the Department of Defense, Office of Economic Adjustment, and we had the assistance of a policy and technical advisory committee. I believe Brian may have served at that time, and members of the planning board and board of selectmen were involved, as well as the 3 or 4 other Upper Cape towns. So last year, last summer, the MMR was nominated again by the Army to update this study. And there were a number of factors. One was the changes in the mission that had taken place since the BRAC in 2005. There was still concern about potential encroachment and land use conflicts between the base and the surrounding land. And I think an ongoing need for improved communication between the base and the towns.
But there were a couple of new things. One was renewable energy. We're all aware of that, and between renewable energy on the base as well as off the base. And also this new item, which was to investigate the potential for shared services for community and military partnerships between the base and the surrounding towns. So the commission was again hired to complete this update, and we're again guided by a policy committee that is now called the MCQ. This is really, it consists of a variety of boards of selectmen representative, APCC, and various military officials that are serving to guide the effort this time around. I'm going to very briefly run through some updates because we are updating the land use study. We're looking at what's changed since 2005, so we've been updating the open space mapping, the renewable energy projects on and surrounding the base. Chapter 40B permits, this was a big issue in 2005, the amount of 40Bs that were immediately adjacent to the base boundary, and also taking a look at the land use on the base itself. We've completed a report in, I believe it was January, that I'm happy to make available if you're interested, on shared service agreements. This explores what they're all about, the history, and where they have taken place across the country. We've updated the build-out analysis, and we've had 2 workshops on community military partnerships. It's hard to see this map, but again, we're updating the renewable energy and open space that's changed since 2005. Chapter 40B permits and what's changed there, and looking at land use on the base itself. Updated build-out analysis is a very generalized build-out that's based on a methodology we're using for the 208 plan update. It does show that there's some, Falmouth has a small portion of its boundary that's adjacent to MMR within the study area. It's probably a little difficult to see in this map. So it doesn't show a lot of development potential within the study area for Falmouth, but nonetheless, there is still some, and we'll be incorporating that into our recommendations going forward. We've also taken a look at wastewater capacity. This was an issue in 2005, and as you've been talking about tonight, it's an ongoing issue for the Cape, and the Upper Cape in particular. This study, these figures are taken from a study prepared by CH2 Hill for Mass Development last year. Shows what the existing capacity of the base treatment plant and what some of the needs are of the surrounding towns. We've also looked at just a few of the intersections, the main gates surrounding the base, traffic issues we have not looked very widely, but just at some of the immediate intersections surrounding the base, and updated some recommendations there. And now just briefly a little bit about public partnerships and what this added focus of this update is for our work this year. Again, is to explore the potential for partnerships between the military and the surrounding towns. And why now? Because the Department of Defense is looking and has looked at some very significant budget cuts. There's been sequestration, and the Budget Control Act of 2011 authorized $1.2 trillion in defense and non-defense spending cuts. So while there's no authorization for BRAC in 2013 or 2015, the military and the communities are, military in particular, is looking at ways to realize savings through reduction in infrastructure, through shared service agreements, and to focus their funding on their core missions. There's also been the National Defense Authorization Act just this year, and this would give the federal government sole source authority to contract directly with municipalities for shared services. So this is a new law that's put in place specifically to allow shared services to happen. So what's a public-public partnership? It's a construct between 2 or more public agencies that combines resources. It's either monetary or in-kind, and it's to achieve common goals and objectives. It creates mutual value that's greater than the partners could achieve on their own, obviously. It leverages resources, addresses common issues, and also there's a sharing of risk. So some of the most common types of public-public partnerships are interlocal support agreements, and we already have that on the MMR and the surrounding towns. Facilities use agreements to share facilities. provision of water, sewer, and other infrastructure, and the use of real property resources for renewable energy. I'm not going to go into great detail, but as part of our study, we've looked very specifically at a partnership that has been carried out in Monterey, California, between the Army Defense Language Institute, the Presidio, and the Naval Postgraduate School. This base was subject to BRAC, and the military, in this case, contracted directly with the city for base operating and maintenance services. Excuse me. In this case, in the Monterey model, Congress authorized the Secretary of Defense to contract for these services with the city as a demonstration project. And it really led to this new act this year to allow this across the United States. Excuse me. And this was a very broad application, include firefighting, security guard, police, tree maintenance, public works. And in this case, the city of Monterey provided $14 million in services to the Army, and the partnership reduced the Army's cost by 41%. So it showed that it was very successful. There are some other very successful partnerships. Some of them are focused on wastewater infrastructure, and some are on recreation. We've looked at a lot of different models. The report I described spells those out in more detail. And since I know you want to get back to your other item, I'll go quickly. We had two workshops, as I mentioned, one in February, where the first one was to look at just broadly what kinds of shared services could happen. And we broke those into three groups: infrastructure, obviously, facilities, and services. And the groups that participated at that first workshop were asked a series of questions on whether these broad categories, we brainstormed for a while, and then more specifically whether they could realistically happen on Cape Cod, what kind of resources are available, and time frame, and other issues and obstacles. They went through an exercise to prioritize those and came up with this list of 6 high priorities. Public works actually rose to the top. I think that was very strong interest on the part of the armed services. Wastewater, no surprise. Renewable energy, solid waste and recycling with the transfer station. Fire and emergency services, which was later set aside because there were some specific exclusions of that, and we already have a mutual aid agreement. And then higher education and training. We had a second workshop in May where we had over 50 participants, really great turnout for this second workshop. The participants were asked to go a little bit further in those 6 areas and completed a concept outline for each project. We dug a little deeper on some of these projects and discussed the most viable options. As I said, Virginia was here. She attended the entire workshop. We had consultants, we had public works officials, Chamber of Commerce, Barnstable County, military and base personnel. So what we're doing right now through the rest of the summer, we're preparing feasibility, some initial feasibility reports on these 4 services options that were kind of rose to the top. One is relocation potentially of the Regional Fire Training Academy onto the base, regional wastewater treatment, shared public works, and looking at some alternatives for the Upper Cape Regional Transfer Station. Our scope also calls for us to prepare a model agreement for one or more of these shared services. We're not sure which one yet, but probably will be the public works model, in looking at the potential for a variety of shared public works services that the military currently contracts for and that may perhaps be shared with the towns. Preparing this model agreement, and then as far as the update to the study, preparing our draft recommendations and final report. I'd be happy to come back at another time if you're interested when we have those recommendations and to describe to you which ones pertain to Falmouth in particular, and give you a little more detail on, for example, the wastewater. And I think we're probably going to be looking for more funding to study that further. It's a rather complex shared service going forward. So appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Sure.
Thank you. Bob?
Yeah, there was one slide that I think it was the Monterey slide where it said that the town of Monterey contributed $14 million and it saved the military 41%. Is it saving the towns money too, or is it just saving the military?
I think in that case, it kept people employed too, so that they used, in this case, the city's public works personnel. So they were hired on a per-service basis. They had a very detailed accounting system, so city employees had access to the base. They did everything from painting trim to doing grounds work, you name it. It was very extensive. It covered a wider range of services. So I don't know specific details, but I do believe it kept the city employees, like they had some excess, either personnel or time available, and they had the expertise, and so they were hired on a contract basis for each unit, each item that they worked on.
Paul?
Yeah, I had a similar question on the Monterey model. The 41%, is that over a number of years? What's the time frame of the 41%? That can't be a year-to-year basis. If you don't know, that's fine.
I don't, that's actually a slide that one of my coworkers prepared.
Because 41% is a big number.
It is,
And
yeah.
is it over a 5-year period?
I think it's a relatively short period of time. It was pretty significant. It's probably not 1 year, but it's a very recent model, very recent, special legislation. So it's not more than probably a couple of years. But I could.
Is there a report on that? It'd be interesting to see that.
Sure. Actually, it's probably spelled out in more detail in the report that I described, so I'd be happy to send you a copy of that.
That'd be very nice
Probably
to
have
see
that
that.
detail in
Yeah.
there.
I have another question for you. The Cape Cod Commission is facilitating this, I understand.
Yes.
And obviously, it's very important to keep the base here because BRAC is going to close it if we don't have a pretty good relationship there. But I'm intrigued by the comment you made. You need legislation to be able to have the federal government contract with the municipalities or the other entities. Does that mean that the contract would intended to be between the federal government and the town of Falmouth, for example, and not include the Cape Cod Commission?
Oh, yes, it wouldn't include the Cape Cod Commission at all. It does allow the military to contract directly with the municipality or vice versa. So it can work both ways. It could be that the military, potentially shares facilities, for example, with the towns. That's one model that's been used. In exchange for perhaps one or more of the towns provides public works services to the base and reduces redundancy because they have a separate contract, for example, for each armed service has a separate contract depending on what the nature of the activity is.
Well, part of the difficulty at the base, as you're well aware, is that there's all these different entities there. It's not just one person responsible for the base. There's about 5 or 6 or more entities up there. So it would have to be the federal government, but the legislation might take a long time to put in place. Is that going to be a hindrance?
It's a real challenge, and that's why our scope calls for a model agreement. So we're looking for the low-hanging fruit, as everybody likes to say, that something that might be a little bit less complex to carry out, to get started and establish that relationship and one agreement on one activity or shared service could lead to others in the future. I think wastewater is going to be much more complex, for example, than some public works services. So that's what we're looking for.
Thank you.
So the Monterey model, the legislation was specific to that?
Yes, it was.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, that was Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld was from that area, so that was that helped.
Yeah.
But it paved the way for the federal legislation that applies everywhere now. So it's really bases across the country are really taking a hard look at this.
So do you think that might be legislation that would encompass all the bases in the country?
It does. It does.
It does.
Yes.
Where's Tip O'Neill when we
Jim.
need?
On the list of priorities there, I saw Public Works was at the top, but I think subsequently I figured out, I'm hoping that drinking water is included in that Public Works division, because if it isn't, it should be higher up in their priorities.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, drinking water is, it's clearly, there's, the Upper Cape Reserve is on the base, and the collaborative You mean in terms of?
Well, in all your priorities, it didn't have drinking water, it had public works and a lot of things. It didn't mention water. It said wastewater, but it didn't say anything about drinking water at all. So I'm hoping it was, public works was at the top, and I'm hoping that that was a major part of it.
I think because the reason water supply wasn't more specifically called out is that there are pretty good arrangements currently for water supply and the collaborative that exists there.
I hope in the long-range view you consider that
Sure.
at a higher level. And the other thing was, I also thought that, the fire and safety was fairly low on the list, and I thought it should have a higher ranking as well. Just as priorities, I would rank myself the drinking water and fire and safety at a much higher level, just because to me, those are 1 and 2.
Yeah, if you're talking about the police and fire.
Well, you had a priorities list of what all the other towns thought, and fire was like 4 or 5 or 6 in the list, or safety, and I didn't see drinking water at all, and those were my only comments.
Yeah, so the fire and safety, the reason that actually kind of fell off the list is that it was determined that there's already mutual aid agreement, and there's also an exclusion, I believe, in it's either state or federal law, and again, I'm not the attorney on it, so kind of hard for me to relate exactly, the language, but there's some restriction on looking at that specifically for a shared service agreement, even though we already have mutual aid. So it was felt among the participants and the military that we didn't need to duplicate something we're already doing pretty well. But I'll take that back on the public water committee, and I'll be happy to get you a copy.
Great. Thank you very, very much.
Appreciate the time.
Okay, so we can move back now, since it's right in the agenda order, to our discussion.
Let me turn the lights back on.
Yes, please. But we can move back to our discussion on the site plan review for Stephen Haddad.
I will move.
Pat, I don't think you ever close public comment on that issue.
Because you don't.
Oh, okay.
Site plan review, it's discussion.
I move that we go back to the site plan review.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
No.
so let's have some discussion now on this.
You didn't ask for opposed.
No, is somebody opposed?
No.
Okay. Bob, you wanted to say something?
I want to file with you the letter from Paul Sellers that's been referred
Oh,
to.
thank you.
I thought that, and I think it was emailed to Marlene today, but I may.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's have,
The other thing I'd like to
oh,
add
I'm
is
sorry.
the concern that Mr. Haddad has about the suggestion about the reinforced surfaces along the edge of the road. If the fire department is satisfied with the 16-foot wide width, which Marlene indicated.
Skimmer, that's the other way.
We would not like to put that vehicle.
Yeah, I saw his dismay.
It's a significant expense, and
Yeah.
they just keep adding up.
Yeah.
Just it's cheaper to pave the road wider, and that's not going to do anything.
Yeah. No, I did note the facial expression of dismay at that, so. Okay, so let's move on with discussion here as to what your thoughts are on this project.
How far are we from the pond? I mean, you had said that in your research, you found that it seemed to apply to developments within 2,000 feet.
Commercial.
That 2,000-foot limit was for those projects that fall within that 2,000 feet of water bodies that were not mapped. So what I'm saying is that now, since November of 2001, since West Falmouth Harbor is now mapped, it doesn't matter how far away it is anymore, as long as it's in the watershed.
Pat?
Yeah.
On that issue, I'm happy to go with just a referral, is my own opinion on it, but that we think, instead of a requirement, just a referral, that should be considered for denitrification on that issue, but it's just my opinion.
Well, we can go either way on that, as I initially stated, so how about everybody else? Do you have any concerns about this?
Yeah, I would go for a referral as well.
referral.
Yeah, because just because something hasn't been done in the past, doesn't mean that we shouldn't look into it for the future.
Ralph?
Right, I believe Mr. Haddad said he hadn't heard back from the
Board of Health.
Board of Health. Is that correct?
I met with Dave Carey this morning, and I've met with Dave Carey several times in the past about denitrifying septic systems, because I knew this topic would come up this evening. And I showed him the plan that we were going to propose, and he's satisfied with the plan that I'm proposing. And then we went on the modeling. The West Falmouth Harbor is improving, great efforts. There's various models out there, and I can't speak to them, that we're not even sure that denitrifying this particular site will have any impact whatsoever on what's going on in the harbor. And if you want to refer it for denitrifying septic system, and if the ZBA wants a denitrifying septic system, I'm going to have to go in. But I respectfully disagree tonight, based on all the information that's been given to me, what I've been researching, that I'm required to do it. And so that's, I would ask that you just, we spent hours and hours and hours on this. I would ask that you simply just put it in as a referral, and they'll take it up with the ZBA.
Yeah.
And move on to some other topic that we can discuss it. Thank you.
That's what I said.
As a referral.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
Ralph?
In the past, we have asked for a groundwater study, or at least some kind of indication of the groundwater flow beneath these developments and in what direction it goes. And I'd like to know whether or not that has been done, and/or whether it could be determined either by the town staff. Somebody in the town might have that available to us, so that the effluent, as it migrates down through the ground, we want to know where it's going. Do you know, Marlene, if that's possible to get the groundwater flow a direction for us?
The map that I've been talking about indicates that. So
Okay.
the studies have been done, and the watershed for West Falmouth Harbors has been studied and mapped. And what I'm saying is that all the property that falls within that line falls within the Coastal Pond Overlay District boundary for West Falmouth Harbor. Those properties, their groundwater flows into that coastal body. So if the property is in the overlay, and they're particular to the different ponds and harbors, that if the property is in that overlay, that study has already been done, and the groundwater is traveling into that estuary.
Okay. So the overlay covers this area, but it's, our dispute as to whether or not applies. Isn't that correct? Am I correct there?
Right, so you have to determine on whether or not you're going to apply the standard, whether you're going to apply the requirements of the Coastal Pond Overlay District. And the language is that word commercial. Commercial development requiring site plan review.
Okay.
The article shall apply to all developments listed here. That's 240-98. This article shall apply to all developments listed here. And one of those thresholds is commercial development requiring site plan review. So if you decide that this is a commercial development that requires a site plan review, then the overlay applies.
Okay, so if I were to superimpose that overlay over this particular parcel of land, it would fall within that,
Yes.
it would fall within that coastal pond overlay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else have further comments? Jim?
I don't think this is commercial, I think it's residential, is my only comment.
Okay, that's what it is now, but I have one comment. The zoning as a B3 allows any of these buildings to be converted at any time into a commercial entity. It's not how they're being built, but remember, the underlying zoning is B3.
That would trigger a change of use, which would bring them back in front of us again.
Yeah,
So it's residential, and if they change the, they have to, I think I'm right, that the change of use comes back to the planning board.
It depends on if it triggers site plan review. So-
But doesn't the change of use do that for commercial property?
Not necessarily. There
What's the
has,
threshold?
the 5 or more parking spaces are 1,000 square feet.
so that's my hang-up on that one, is the underlying zoning. Ralph?
Right. Mr. Haddad and Mr. Ahmed have stated that there's no denitrification at the two other condominium developments, and I don't doubt that that's true, but I would like the staff to verify that, please, that there is no denitrification system at West Wind or at Fieldstone or...
Well, Fieldstone has it, Old Dock Road doesn't.
There's none at the Old Dock Road and West Wind.
Well, that's his property, isn't it?
No,
No, you were the developer?
no.
He
One is-
developed the
one isn't.
property.
Did you develop both of those? No.
Old Dock Road.
Right.
So he would know.
But, yeah, okay, you know, and the other one is Mr. Dalton, I believe. Fieldstone was Mr. Dalton.
So Pat, do you want me to talk to that?
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Ralph, to be clear, the condominium project to myself, of 681, the property I'm here before you tonight, is Fieldstone Place. That has a denitrifying septic system. The letter I gave you, a lot of you didn't think they had to, Warren agreed to do it.
Right, okay.
For Old Dock Road, where the ideal spot was, I was not required to put a denitrifying septic
Right.
system. And at West Wind Cottages, there is not a denitrifying septic system there now.
Yeah. I'm sorry, West Wind is Mr. Dalton, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We're fortunate, John Lane is the listing broker in West Wind, and he perhaps could tell us whether or not there's denitrifying septic systems there.
and Pat, I can answer this.
Yeah, Marlene will answer that.
Okay, so the West Wing Cottages were the Annandale Apartments. You did not do a site plan review. There was no site plan review required for West Wing Cottages. The reason is, the West Wing Cottages were considered a less intensive use than the Annandale Apartments. The number of units went down, the number of bedrooms went down, the number of parking spaces went down. There was no site plan review required,
Right.
so you had no role.
Right.
Now, the ideal spot, you did a site plan review. However, on the septic issue, the board heard testimony and agreed that the flow from the redeveloped condominium project would be less than the flow from the
Hotel.
motel. So in that case, a site plan review was required. You looked at the existing flow versus the proposed flow, and you decided it was going to be a reduction in impact.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Well, I think we've got probably two ways we could do this. We could either say ourselves that we want to have a D-night system required, if that's what we want to do, or we could put it in the referral to the ZBA that they could attach it to their approval if we think it should be done. So we got, or the third option is Title V is fine. So I'd like to hear more to the point on that, what the board would like. Paul?
We were given a letter of an opinion by the building inspector, confirmed by the town council, that the overlay does not apply to this property.
No.
No.
That was before the mapping.
That was before.
Right. The mapping has since been done. So it would apply to this project.
Do we need an opinion from council
Would that be helpful?
since it's
I
changed?
can request one if you want one. The letter that you have in your file was from 2001 and was
Right.
specific to the project south of this. It does not, that letter was not written for this project.
Mhm, right.
And the
But
letter
it's the
is
same property.
outdated.
It's
now.
not the same property.
Adjacent property.
It's
Oh,
the
adjacent
adjacent property.
This property down here.
Plus, the letter is outdated because since that time, West Falmouth Harbor contribution has been mapped.
But do we need an opinion from council if that's what governs this?
It is what governs it. From-
Yeah, I'd like a letter from council just regarding whether this, because if it's commercial or not. We're really close to deciding that, and it was so close, I
Yeah,
would rather have a council's opinion on that instead of making
Okay.
the call. Because what did it say, 1,000 feet or 5 parking spaces?
that's too
You
bad.
could, whatever it was.
Yeah, oh,
Put a
okay,
couple
I see what you're
offices, let's see.
Yeah. Okay, so you want council's opinion as to whether it's applicable to require a D-night system. Is that correct? Okay.
No, it's whether or not it's commercial.
Well, if it's commercial, it
Commercial.
does.
That's what I
it's not
meant.
commercial.
I'm umbrellaing by saying,
But
if
this
it's
is residential,
applicable
isn't
to require a D-night system, is it commercial?
Right,
Does it fall under that?
right.
And if it doesn't fall under that, I believe we could still ask the ZBA, we could still, under our referral to them, if we thought it would be advisable,
Yeah.
we could still
Not
put
our
that in
issue.
our referral to the ZBA.
So
It's not our
for
issue,
the,
you know?
for the coastal pond overlay item, I'll request town council's opinion, and we'll try to get that to you for next week to continue that discussion. Are there any, do you want to discuss any other aspects of this project?
I just see it turning on whether, where it's zone B3, it's an
Right.
issue of zoning versus its proposed use. And then, everybody always talks about what could happen. Well, it could also be turned into a commercial entity as well, so I think we do need some advice on
Some
that.
guidance on that.
Okay, I will get that.
Okay, now, anything else under our site plan review that anybody else sees they'd like to, Ralph?
Traffic mitigation.
Okay, it was pointed out to us that with the garages and the amount of space, that it's considered that there would be bicycles inside. What do you see? They'd be inside the garage for protection, that people would have them because the proximity of the bicycle path.
I'm not just sure. I want to examine that. I want to look at what 240 says about it again.
So you'd like to think about that a little longer as to
I would.
anything further on traffic mitigation? Okay, anybody else have a problem with anything else that we're looking at under site plan?
We're gonna get a referral on the drainage? Has that been done?
No, we have yet to get the referral on the drainage.
Yeah, we'll get that wrapped up too. You're going to be discussing this again next week.
Sure looks like it,
Yep.
yeah. But it should go relatively faster because we've
Yeah,
defined
we'll
questions.
have some more information.
Okay, does anybody else have any other issues that they want to have further defined?
Nope.
Okay. There's still the Historic District Commission, the certificate.
Okay, so right now, where that stands is that a previous version of the plan was denied at the last meeting. So at some point, the commission will have to re-examine the project when it's submitted. their action is totally independent of anything that you do under 240. So you can proceed without them, and they can catch up later.
Okay, so there's nothing on any of these other things that's outstanding that would hold up our deciding for site plan review, except potentially the drainage.
So we'll get the engineering referral for the drainage. I'll ask town council's opinion on the coastal pond overlay commercial issue. You'll take some time to look at the traffic mitigations requirements for site plan review, and talk about that. The only other item was whether, or the only other item that I think that you might want to discuss is whether or not a 2-foot cleared shoulder is fine, or whether you want it reinforced.
I personally think that a 2-foot cleared shoulder is fine. Because a 16-foot road is, it's wider than the one I live on.
It's residential, so I'm happy
Yeah.
with that. We good?
I see no need for that.
No,
Anybody?
no,
Okay, so,
just as long as it's kept clear.
yeah. Mhm. Not planted in,
Yeah.
yeah.
We also, site plan today, we saw what happens with that.
Yeah, of course it does, if you're not mowing it. Okay, anybody else have any further concerns?
No.
Okay, so Marlene will look these things up, and we will have that ready for us for next week's meeting. Next on the agenda is the determination of access on Greenbrier Lane.
I can speak to that.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to switch out of zoning thinking and into subdivision control thinking now. So subdivision control is your little book, your chapter 305. And what we're talking about here is section 305-50, and it's entitled Issuance of Building Permits in your book. And the language is a little difficult, but it says, no building permit shall be issued for the erection of any building until the building inspector first determines that the lot on which the building is to be erected is not within a subdivision, or that a way furnishing the access to such lot as required by the subdivision control law is shown on a plan recorded or entitled to be recorded under section 81X of the subdivision control law, and that any conditions endorsed thereon limiting the right to erect or maintain buildings on such lot shall have been satisfied or waived by the board. Okay, so that's a little complicated, but pretty much before, if there's a lot in sometimes there's a question on whether a lot is entitled to a building permit or not. Now, this Greenbrier Lane, lot, and I have the plan here, is shown on a subdivision plan endorsed by the planning board in 1959. Now, the building commissioner is asking you for some help here, though, because there's no record of any construction standards attached to this plan. We don't have a decision of the planning board, we don't have any record of this meeting, we don't have any minutes. All we have is the recorded plan from 1959 that shows lot 13 and lot 14. Lot 13 is vacant, lot 14 has a house on it. And as many of you know, there's a small, it's approximately 12 feet variable width paved road that comes up the side of the property here, serving lot 14. It also serves this house back here, but that house is actually not subject to the plan. Now, because there's no written decision or construction plan with this, Eladio, before he will issue a building permit, is coming to the planning board under subdivision control law now to ask on what improvements, if any, you think this lot owner should make to his portion of the road here for access to another house. Now, you can, all of the land that we're talking about is owned by the owner of Lot 13, so he has the legal right to do this. And you can decide whether or not, if you're going to require improvements, whether or not those improvements go his entire length of the property, or whether or not you just want it improved up to wherever a new driveway is going to be. So as you know, the surface is paved. It's a relatively flat section of town. There's not a lot of grade issues that we're concerned about. So before a building permit is issued here, you need to vote on whether or not you want any construction improvements. You're not creating another lot. This is an existing lot of record. It's not a subdivision. We're only talking about construction.
Yeah.
Well, we've all visited the site except Pat this afternoon, and it seems to me obvious that the roadway, the paved area needs to be increased by a minimum of 2 feet.
The width.
So, what did I say?
The width.
Isn't that what I said?
You said the paved area.
The width of the paved area needs to be increased by 2 feet
Sorry.
and up to wherever the access to the lot is determined by the property owner and the building commissioner. So I would move that we ask staff to draft a letter to Mr. Gore stating that, and that it be signed by the chairman.
Do I have a second?
I have a question. When you say paved, does that mean hard pavement or?
Yes.
So you're requesting that he actually widen the paved road?
Correct.
By 2 feet?
By
Okay.
2 feet.
Okay.
Ralph has moved that. Is there a second for his motion?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
For discussion.
For discussion,
For
he
discussion.
said.
Yeah.
He's seconding it, so for purposes of discussion.
Yeah, but you're
And
not
you just asked
voting.
for a vote.
Don't ask for a vote.
You just asked for a vote, Pat.
I know, because you made a motion, and he
I know, but he
seconded it.
seconded it, and now he
Now you
seconded it
discuss
for
it.
discussion.
Okay.
We always do that.
Discussion first.
You called for a vote, and I think.
No, I call for a vote on your motion.
That my motion is to improve, to widen it by 2 feet, and he seconded for the purpose of discussion.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
everybody wants to discuss.
Yeah.
All right,
The
fine, then
motion.
it's, the
Discuss it.
motion's off the table.
No, the motion's on the
Motion is on.
table. The motion's on the table, you're discussing the motion, and then you call for the vote.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
Okay.
thought it was the other way
Problem is, it's 9
around.
o'clock
Okay,
already.
Yeah,
okay.
Okay, so
let's
you're
discuss
discussing the motion.
okay.
It's 9 o'clock.
So
that's why.
Ralph feels that the owner should pave with hard pavement up to whatever point the driveway is going to be determined to go into the property. I don't feel that we would have to require hard pavement. I would like to see it widened so that it's either reinforced turf or gravel, but I'd also want to set some sort of depth down the driveway, the existing driveway, because they could just put it right on that corner and do 12 feet. And I don't think that would be adequate because of that intersection with Sandwich Road. I think is pretty dangerous because it's hard to see coming out of there. So I would like to see some sort of requirement that it go X number of feet down that way.
Jim?
I certainly won't argue with Ralph, but I would suggest that I'd feel happier. I'd agree with Ralph's proposal, I'm not going to argue with it, but I would be happier to see it widened with gravel all the way down to the next house, because there's a section there that I can't see fire engines or anything getting back. When we were there, it was pretty tight. I'd like to see, Ralph, was your suggestion 2 feet on each side?
No,
Just 2 feet, 1 foot on each side?
no,
2 feet anywhere?
yes.
I'll go along with the 2 feet anywhere, but I'd like to see it go the entire length But I won't disagree, I'll also go with Ralph. That's just my comment.
Doug?
I'd like to go a little further, but no argument.
I think we should specify the cutting back of the rhododendrons and the other vegetation. And I don't know if 2 feet's enough for the cutting back, because it's gonna grow back quickly. So I would say maybe we should ask them to cut back more like 3 or 4 feet, and then 2 feet of gravel on either side, I think would be adequate. And the length of the driveway, I agree with that.
The length of the driveway to where his own driveway would come into his house, or the length to the property line?
I would say the length of the whole thing.
To the lot line.
To the point where the vegetation terminates, because
It
when
opens
you
up.
get to a certain point here, it's wide open, and then I don't think there's any more problem. But where it's heavily vegetated in this area, and it seems like it's probably been overgrown for a long time.
So the length of his lot then?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because this is where the house is here, that would be to the length of his lot, right?
Right.
So we're
It
only
opens up-
discussing to this point, correct?
Right. He wouldn't necessarily be able
He
to cut
couldn't
down
do it
his
there.
neighbors.
All he could do is his own lot.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the limit of our,
The most, yeah, I'm saying the farthest you can go is to the lot line between 13 and 14.
13 or
Right.
14, that's as far as we could go.
Yeah.
That would be my suggestion.
Anyone take a quick look at what we're talking about?
No, I saw it.
I mean, to add 2 feet of paving, I don't know that you can really just add it. I think they're gonna end up repaving that whole thing, and that's probably gonna cost them $12,000 or $15,000. So I think that's onerous.
Yeah, because it's, what, 150 feet? I can't read that, but it's a
Sounds
good
about
distance. I agree with Doug that the vegetation should be cut back further because it does grow back. I know that from my own driveway.
Yeah, you'd probably want to have it cut back 3 feet on either side, I would say.
Yeah, I'd say
the way that grows.
4
4 even.
All the underbrush and any non-large tree should be cut back to prevent growth from coming and occurring in that area.
Marlene, could this person get a curb cut off of Sandwich Road?
They do not have enough frontage.
I know that.
Frontage on Sandwich Road.
Right.
So, in order to get technically, I think yes, they could.
They can do
But to get a building permit, they would have to do this
Yeah.
first. Because the Ladio the legal frontage needs to be accessible. So that's why he's coming to you for determination of access, because they don't have enough frontage on Sandwich Road to make that the legal frontage.
Yeah, right.
So before a building permit can issue, the improvements have to be done across the Greenbrier Lane side. So once the house is built, they can probably put the driveway on Sandwich Road if they wanted to, but these improvements would have to be done anyway.
Okay.
So what's the feeling of the board here? Up to
Well-
where the driveway's going to go in, the length of his lot, gravel, paved?
Can I make a motion?
Sure.
Or-
If I understand, he owns both sides of
Right.
the land. There are some trees that are very close to the road, so he should be able to take it from either side if he's going to do it that way. And I think it should just have to go to the entrance to his property, wherever his driveway is.
Wherever his driveway is.
Rather than the end of the property. That's a concern.
Well, I think we have a motion on the table, it's been seconded, either has to be amended or voted on, is that right? I'm sorry, I'm just guessing
Yeah.
that's procedure.
Yeah.
That's right.
So do you want to amend it?
So I don't want to get a,
The motion on the floor is that he provide 2 additional feet of paving,
Of hard paving,
hard
Hard
paving.
so we can either vote that up or down
So,
to the driveway though,
to the.
not the
driveway.
entire length.
right, to his driveway. Okay, so all in favor of that, hard paving up to where his driveway goes in?
Aye.
I'll go for that.
I've got 2. Okay, all opposed?
Aye.
3 opposed, 4 opposed.
Okay. So,
So we need another motion.
I would like to move that we require clearance of up to 4 feet from the existing paved road that can be taken from either side of the existing paved road for the length of the property to the abutter's property line.
And saying nothing about adding any gravel or anything else.
Yeah, I'll add the gravel. I'll say it should be gravel, coupled with gravel.
The whole 4 feet or 2 feet to either side?
Yeah, whatever is cleared to give them that, well, 2 feet.
2 feet to
2
either
feet,
side?
yeah.
Okay, so can I just want to make sure I've got this
Yeah.
right. 4 feet of clearance across the entire length of the frontage to
Yeah.
the property line, and 2 feet
feet of
of
gravel.
gravel shoulder.
Added to the 12-foot wide existing.
Okay.
Okay. Does everybody understand that? I need a second to that
Does
motion.
that mean he's gonna add 2 feet of gravel on each
I'll
side?
second it for discussion.
Okay.
Oh, excuse me. Just to be clear, are we gonna, is that meaning that he's gonna put 2 feet of gravel on each side
No, it would
or
be,
either side?
it would be 2 feet, if he comes in and he adds 2 feet to one side, then it crosses over, it's just 2 feet to make the maximum width 14 feet of pavement and gravel.
Okay.
Jim?
Discussion on that. I like this because there's some pretty nice trees there, and it gives them a chance to try to save them. I'm not going to design it for him, but he might be able to meander that thing around and save a couple of really nice trees.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm in favor of that.
I just question why it has to go to the property line, not to the entrance to the property, to the driveway.
To his driveway.
The motion is to take it to the end of
I
the
know,
property.
right.
But I'm concerned with why we have to continue there if he widen it to his entrance.
For
to his
safety
driveway.
vehicles passing this way, I'm thinking of fire engine going down the street. It was awful tight there.
But it gets tight after his property.
No, it doesn't. It opens right up. Wide. If you go down beyond his property, it's wide open on both sides, all the way down. It's no issue.
And again, my concern was he could just come in 50 feet and be done with it, just to cheap out, and I think it should be wide.
You go down to his property line, and it's fields on either side.
So anything could go.
I didn't see the drawing how far the property line is from the entrance.
That's
so
the drawing it down. That's,
you know, we're-
It's not a big expense just to cut that stuff back.
Yeah, it's not as onerous as,
it's just, is it
hot
lot 13 and
pavement.
14 we're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're talking, it ends at lot 14. Because after that, it's wide
goes
open.
from Sandwich Road to here. See, and this is that
But you
corner.
can't tell this is open here.
Well,
But if you were down there, you could.
if you were down there and this was cleared a little bit, you would be able to.
What's the answer? How much further beyond his driveway is the property line?
Well, there's no
We
driveway.
don't know where his driveway is.
We have
It's
no
not
idea
shown.
where his driveway is.
He could put his driveway anywhere.
See, and what I'm saying is he could
There's
put
a
his driveway
car-
right
yeah.
here, and it doesn't do anything to affect that.
So, Ralph?
Yeah, I got a question for Doug. How do we know, can you put gravel down? How do you know the weight-bearing capacity of that? Let's say, for instance, that those shoulders are soft, and we say we want gravel put down there. How do we designate that to make sure that that will support the weight of vehicles?
Well, you would probably strip out the topsoil and put down a dense grade base and then gravel. That's typical gravel.
Right, so do we need to
do.
stipulate that?
We do.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah.
So we want weight-bearing, adequate weight-bearing gravel?
Yeah, we usually say H20 wheel loading, that's the.
Okay, that's
Okay,
fine. I
that's
don't
what
care
we
whatever
need.
you say, but I'm just saying, I think it's,
Correct.
you know, you're looking at just, you could just dig it aside and
That's
sprinkle
spread
some
the
stone
stone.
on
Right.
it, you know?
You're right. Yeah.
So you could have a vehicle settle into that real easily.
Yeah.
It's a good comment, Ralph,
Yeah.
on that.
My old mechanical engineering coming out.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments
civil.
on this? Okay, so the motion is that the vegetation be cut back to 4 feet on either side, is that correct? Or meander?
It can
Total.
meander.
It can meander, total of 4 feet.
Total of 4
Okay. And a total of 2 feet of gravel, again, can meander, be added,
To each, whatever the number
whatever
is.
the requirement is.
Yep, across the frontage to the lot line. It was the motion.
Yeah.
Okay. So is everybody ready to vote on that?
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay,
Okay.
so that's done.
First motion.
It's your first one, really? Yeah. Oh, gee. All right, does anybody have anything they want to bring up on a future agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
I would like us to look into the Chatham's Conservancy District's bylaw. It has to do with floodplain building and construction.
Okay.
And maybe looking at, we need to build our own bylaw
To that.
or adopt theirs, because that has become an issue, and from our discussions on
yeah.
our committee, subcommittee, I think it's important that we look into that. And also something that come up tonight, it's been a while since I've looked at the Coastal Pond Overlay District information, but I think we need to look at that because the commercial aspect of it, I think, needs to be discussed, because that kind of set me back a little bit. And I was thankful that Pat brought up the point that the zoning was B3, so that does apply in my mind. So I think I'd like to look at that.
That specific subparagraph B?
Yeah.
Or did you want to look at the whole thing? All of those 3 different applicability areas?
I'd just like to see where it applies, and then maybe we need to look at other places where it should apply.
Needs to be beefed up or
Yeah,
clarified.
Yeah, because in a situation like tonight, you're adding a lot of extra units to something that didn't exist before, so.
And could go commercial
and could
under
go
the
commercial
underlying
under the-
zoning.
Right, so I think we need to look into that.
Ralph?
Yeah, I asked the staff for updates for 2 things. One is the study that the Cape Cod Commission is doing for us. And the second thing is the update for our, for 240 and so forth.
Oh, the bylaw
The
rewrite?
bylaws, our applicable bylaws. I'm trying to remember whether town meeting voted to approve that or not. I believe they
They
did.
did.
Yeah.
So there's money out there to get that started, so I'd like to know, I'd like an update on that, please.
And
Doug?
I'd like to continue our discussion on the beach, the retreat or reinforced
How we're going to handle this.
items like the bike path. And I got the email from staff about interactions between planning boards and property owners, which was informative, but didn't really get to the point of what the town should do on its own parcels, and what is our real policy going forward as far as, are we gonna just abandon these beachfront resources, or are we gonna protect them? I think we need to have that
We are
discussion
bringing that
soon.
though, right? That's coming. From our subcommittee.
Bring it on.
It's on the table.
But I also think it's a good thing to have the discussion here
Yeah.
so that we can bring this into our discussion in the subcommittee, too.
So we will,
Just want to discuss it first.
That doesn't mean that we
I don't
can't
care.
go ahead, but
I don't
I'd
care.
like the input.
I don't care.
Okay.
so Pat, we'll work with you, when we've got the whole list, we'll work with you on scheduling all of these into your
Absolutely, sure.
agendas. Okay.
Yep. Paul?
Last week, we assigned people to be liaisons to various committees. I'd like to see periodic report on that monthly or as appropriate as to what's going on. I've been attending the water quality meetings, and it might be interesting for the rest of the board to know what's going on, for example, and likewise on the other committees. So if we do it perhaps monthly or whatever makes sense. And the other thing is, I happened to watch the Board of Selectmen meeting the other night, and Brian was talking about the construction of the intersection at CVS, for example, and Stop and Shop. It'd be nice to get periodic reviews on what's going on with those to the board directly.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, correspondence, I have one item in here, and this is, excuse me, an agenda from the Cape Cod Commission. They're meeting Thursday, July 25th at 3 p.m. The public meeting has in regard to a presentation on Cape-wide fertilizer management, proposed District of Critical Planning Concern nomination. So they're going to be discussing that in case anybody wishes to attend that. It has to do with the fertilizer. And for further detail,
They're proposing DCPC for fertilizer?
that's what they're saying, proposed DCPC nomination.
For what town? Or all of the Cape?
Cape-wide.
It looks like Cape-wide,
Beautiful.
That's
okay?
interesting.
So anybody who'd be interested, it's at 3 p.m. July 25th.
Where's that?
First District Courthouse, Assembly of Delegates Chamber.
The normal place where they meet.
Yeah. But you can get further details from this in the planning office.
Yeah, I'll make some copies and give it to you.
Okay,
Motion to adjourn?
please.
Second?
So moved. Okay.
Bar closes.
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah,
Before the bar closes.